NYC. And yes, I'm at the beach in northern Michigan. Thought I'd put the same bikini top on with this sort of jacket to make it a little more stately, but decided to jazz up the bottom a little bit today. So, anyways, um, it's been interesting lately. I removed my recent Simple Yoga with Deborah episode that was for the FIFA World Cup that was supposed to like make up for some things because it was so terribly badly messed with on the feed and made my legs look really short. And so I just simply got rid of it. Um, and then I got some really bizarre comments on my last Simply Yoga episode, the newest one that was actually really fun and people really like. And it's way more tame than most of the crap on YouTube. And it's whatever, it's still up. It's just the whole thing was just kind of funny because YouTube has a lot of really disgusting, overly sexual crap on it that's basically porn. And somebody complained that I was doing yoga at a two-piece on it. It was like, just shut up. Seriously. Unfortunately, that kind of stuff does come from Endeavor Corp because the dumb Russian Chinese company that's angry that they can't just steal from everybody and make everyone work for free on their projects and labor traffic people's bodies and lives, right? So that's why we don't pay attention to that kind of crap. Also, cheers to Michigan State. So, um, starting out with this episode, I think we're gonna go through some recent stuff on Madonna's failed biopic, or she's claiming it's a failed biopic. Here's the thing about Madonna. We've already covered Madonna. Like, whatever biopic you would want in her life, you already got here. In this series, it's that she's also Salma Hayek. She's a nasty labor trafficker. She traffics kids. She messes with the U.S. banking system. She messes with the U.S. world system. She's a little KGB. It isn't just that she's a whore in the sense that she's like a prostitute. It's actually that she's a whore and steals. And she's never been a real singer. She was simply better at hiding than everyone else and was frankly a client of Michael Swanberg. And it was the English in MI6 that finally put together how ridiculous she was. She's also participated in a lot of smear campaigns against them and other groups, and bizarrely turned out to be trying to kill Obama, former President Obama herself. Her quote-unquote liberalness, like, all you need to know about Madonna is that she literally set up all those pussycat parades down in the Washington, D.C. area for women to go to and be filmed by CSA Robotics Center booths down in Hamilton, and have their faces scanned for facial recognition technology to then later be stalked and killed for simply asserting their civil rights. So you don't want to be on the Madonna train. You don't even want to be on the pussycat ear thing train because it identifies you as, you know, you're supposed to be identified as some female rights activist that can be stalked and killed them. I spent a lot of time training people to go out and effectively talk about their rights as women, but I can tell you honestly, as being someone who was taken down to DC under the pretenses of a false investigation, raped and beaten for years, and forcibly worked at labor traffic for Endeavor Corporation, which was a Russian and Chinese company by Bolsheviks, it's pretty much a waste of your time. Really. So, I have my hat back on now. As far as the movie about her, to have an accurate film, it would have to be about how she's also been Salma Hayek all these years and literally do nothing but labor traffic and beat on kids and ran. It's just a disgusting pervert. And doesn't sing, and the material's all stolen. You know, and as far as the good parts, I mean, I already told you the interesting stuff about how good she was at trafficking people and all the criminal behavior, you know? So, we've covered all that. So no, her biopic was killed because nobody wants to see a really accurate movie about Madonna's life. You know? As much as you need to know has been covered in these shows, right? So, you know, we can say goodbye to Madonna, who's apparently giving away a free Pride concert in New York with another Pride people actually want to watch because they're disgusted by her, and I don't blame them for it. If you're an actual gay person, Madonna did nothing but try to hurt you, and if you're an actual female, she's done nothing but try to hurt you. And she literally gets excited over every operation booth on Hamilton, Labatt, or CACI Center put together for the neocons where they traffic people in other countries, and it's always some fake war, right? You know, the recent conflict with Israel and Iran, she was way too excited about that. So, you know, I know there's some years of research and contacts myself and having been labor trafficked in the industry. I was labor trafficked to Madonna. She's literally another stupid person that owes money to me, and other individuals will never pay it because she's Russian KGB, called the FSB of Russia today. Also, right now, apparently appearing in either French or Italian Vogue with her whole body photoshopped terribly. So she's trying to wear like my legs, which is one of the reasons I threw out the most recent episode of Simply Yoga with Deborah, where my legs look more short. That was supposed to be the FIFA World Cup. I don't want to ruin it for everybody, so I gave away another episode of Simply Yoga with Deborah since that episode got ruined as far as the feed and all that. Um, making my legs look super stubby and short. Because one thing you probably know about me is I've definitely got a little bit of tummy. I've definitely got long legs, right? One thing you also know about me is I've got a little bit of a chin. Definitely got long legs. Definitely got a little bit of a chin here. Definitely got long legs. You see a picture of me where I've got like none of this here and super short legs? It's not me. So any pictures look like that, it isn't accurate. You know, always got a little bit of a belly, got super long legs, super long arms. Like, it's how it is. It's just life. So, um, let's talk about some recent stuff though. By the way, wait, hold on. We're gonna talk about Britney Spears, so I'm gonna change it up with the hat. So we're gonna do the dumb hat that we can't tell if it's for the American flag or if it's for like the French flag or the British flag, because it's like doing 3 different flags. So you can now be really nebulous and weird for the holidays by wearing hats like this that don't make sense, because this doesn't really look like the U.S. flag. It doesn't really look like the French flag entirely, and it really doesn't look like the English flag either. But let's get into the rest of this. So I'm going to talk about Britney Spears for a minute. Britney Spears definitely belongs in prison. She's part of Endeavor Corporation. She was one of Patrick Whitsel's creations. I obviously sang in her plays. I've also performed in her plays. Never paid me for it. I told you the horrible stories about the PCUSA, which is a Russian organization for the Russian FSB and Chinese CCP, as well as members of the Khmer Rouge, right? Still active in the U.S. as well as the Shining Path. And you have B'nai B'rith, and you also have the cult of ISIS. So when you get through these shows, you're going to go, ooh, organized religion seems to be a really bad place to be, and I would agree. I don't do anything with organized religion today, and that's even after all the discussions with the Episcopalian Church. I know they told me about my mom's life because she was actually Episcopalian before getting dragged into the KKK, Russian FSB, PCUSA cult. By the way, the PCUSA is incredibly difficult to deal with because when you're stuck dealing with them, they just deny everything. So does the PCA. And try to see that they can erase your memory. And unfortunately, they're also going to be boozed out in Hamilton, Lobotta, CISA, etc. So there's no point in talking about anything. Of course, my poor mom got trapped in it and then eventually died in it. The reason I want to get into this is she was trafficked for other performers that you probably know in the past that were pop singers, performers, in films. I went through something similar and managed to get out of it. It's pretty horrible. And it was really only because of my mother's efforts before she died, and my father, and frankly, some of the other people I've named in previous shows that I'm not going to talk about in this episode because some of them are still alive. But Britney Spears was one. And it's important to note that because Britney spends a lot of time trying to get sympathy, and there's no reason to be sympathetic to her. She's a labor trafficker. She's a nasty person. And she spends a lot of time making fun of the rest of us. And she has some recent footage where she talks about how the police make her wear Freddy Krueger masks and how horrible her life is. And now she's got Candace Owens feeling sorry for her. And the thing about Candace Owens is she's part of TPUSA, and she's done a really good job of coming out with some of the issues on Charlie Kirk and Erica Kirk. But she's also not really covering the stories accurately, and she's using a lot of code phrasing to mean that she's still stuck dealing with Endeavor as her management and may even be a victim herself. So, in other words, Candace, nobody really gives a shit about Britney Spears. She's pretty much a member of MS-13, works for Endeavor Corp, and is Russian, and it's completely weird for you to talk about feeling sorry for her and her bizarre footage. If Britney Spears suddenly died, none of us would be at a loss. In fact, most of us would probably have better lives because it'd be one less person like J-Lo who's constantly after people to labor traffic them in this country. Let's be honest. We're down to odds and ends. This is simply stated odds and ends. It's just reminders of what's been covered in previous episodes and seasons. And, you know, what's really important and clarity in media for those of you who need it. It's important to note that there's been some recent investigations in Michigan, corporate welfare crackdowns by Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who figured out she did some trips to Europe and he decided to crack down on corporate welfare issues and money spent in Michigan recently. So, let's see. TMZ recently ran a really weird story about a dead whale, sperm whale, in the front of a cruise ship that pulled into a port on Friday, June 26, 2026 in Alaska. I found myself bizarrely laughing at the footage because that's exactly what I would expect of a ship that had Russian FSB or KGB on it. That's kind of weird crap they pulled. It bizarrely reminded me of my horrible trips with Cersei and Wilhelm. I went on several cruises and actually hate the idea of being on cruise ships now because I don't want to be trapped on a ship with these weird people. Unfortunately, if you go on a cruise and you're someone like me, or you have any merited value as an artist or scientist or thinker, you're stuck in the uncomfortable position of potentially being cornered by Russian KGB, and they might even be the staff. The reason the last cruise I went on to Hawaii with these crazy people as part of the investigations was so heavily secured was because the U.S. government and other world governments didn't want me to be trafficked or stuck with them on the cruise and something even more horrible to happen. So I would probably never take another cruise again in my entire life. But when I see a dead sperm whale in the front of a cruise ship, I think, yeah, that's a Russian FSB right there. Yeah, that's exactly the kind of thing they do on a cruise ship. So let's see. I have a line for you that I have to bring forward. It's an old line and a piece of information that somebody will apparently else understand. I just started laughing when I heard it. But did Jeremy Skog ever do anything that made sense? No, he plainly wasted my life and yours making us work for free for Endeavor and was too shady and weird to work for Angelina Jolie. Okay. Represented Laura going off on issues despite not coming forward during the time periods where Chrissy Noor and Pam Bondi were empowered in their various positions as both Attorney General and the Secretary of DHS. She went off on the current Secretary of DHS this week, and it really didn't make a lot of sense. And Deloro really does look like somebody who would have pejoratively been called a bull dyke, and another error which doesn't help you much, meaning a female labor trafficker, not necessarily a gay woman. By the way, nothing makes me more sad than women who are actually gay calling themselves dykes, because dykes are female labor traffickers. Or worse, that there's actually parades with women calling themselves dykes and are happy that they're female labor traffickers. I'm not sure which one it is, and I don't want to know anymore. I just know I know one. Let's see. Reminder that Senator John Thune of the U.S. Senate is a Nazi murderer and frankly said he was a member of the Taliban and said that he was going to have Allah Kushin killed for setting up to the old KGB and yes, for being better than sex than him. Now, what is that? That's called Russian obfuscation. You don't kill people because they're better at sex than you. It's important to note that I would never have known he was Jordan Anderson because he wore that facial masking technology for Booz Allen Hamilton when he tried to hang out with me before I actually dumped him because he was really abusive and hit me. And I never would have known about any of it if he hadn't bragged about it and if Wilhelm and Cersei hadn't also brought it out into the open because they were so proud of it and the abuse, and that he hadn't put me so forward so awkwardly to be trapped to Endeavor. And it's important to remember that most of us were laughing about the masking technology because of how ridiculous it was, but that's a typical Russian KGB tactic. So you need to be really careful about laughing at some of the stuff they do, because they do it on purpose to make you laugh and get you off guard. And my mom made that mistake a number of times. They'll beat you for it. So, as ridiculous and weird as he is, if you're down the DC area, it's important to remember that a lot of that stuff is done to get you off guard and to beat you. And I saw even U.S. government officials get beat up on by some of these guys at the KGB, part of the FSB of Russia, right? Just keep this on. We'll pretend like we're patriotic today. So anyways, Endeavor is a Russian company. They're doing his management. It's important to note that I, unfortunately, doing the investigations, he realized that they had been after me at Luther College and frankly demanding that I be trafficked to him. And he may even actually have turned out to be Patrick Wetzel himself in the end, which means he has supposedly multiple wives. Of course, Martin Klammer also played that role, and that's just a role in this dumb cult they're all in. It's part of the old KGB. So the reality about it is that, he's basically a serial killer and a child predator, and that it's important to note that he said in advance that he was going to kill also Alla Cushing, and it's not a nice event. He's also talked about openly murdering his current wife, who happens to be Becky Traynor, Becky Traynor, who's in a relationship with Greg Thornton. I wish to call her Becky Thornton. But here's the point. These aren't isolated events, and we used to hysterically make fun of him when we realized who it was because he thought he was really good at sex because he put his hands on women and give them the burn signal, which is actually a military signal. That's not sex. That's not even a sex signal. That's just a signal that anybody could have sent through Booz Allen Hamilton, Labad, JSA Accenture. You can waste your money putting your hands on people and burning them, but that's not sex. And it's not being good at sex. And it has nothing to do with sex. It's a form of abuse. It's a form of abusiveness. And so it's laughably weird, and I actually used to make fun of it. It's probably why it even hit me. I said, that's not sexual. That's just you being abusive and weird to people, and they don't actually like it. This thing with women or men even show up partially clothed or seeming deranged coming out of his office, they're probably clearly getting tortured and they're in labor trafficked, probably for Endeavor Corp. Let's figure out what that is. As far as housing, people, look, we can make jokes about Trump, Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, and Senator Thune having sex, which is the signaling they're giving, and I'm sure they probably do since they're from the old KGB. But I'm going to be really honest with you. I wouldn't make fun of it too much because they're basically both child predators and really disgusting and weird. And Trump's at the point where he's actually screaming and yelling at people now and telling them he wants everyone who's Syrian or Haitian out of the country. And those are the two groups that do caregiving. And the guy's literally a dork in need of a caregiver at this point. I mean, he's old and weird and on amphetamines. He just wants to have conversations where he tells everybody who's a weird murder at the rate. And, you know, he just wants to rock out with his cock out and have some weird party that got rained out at some kind of weird child porn festival. It's called like Freedom 250 or something down in DC, which probably literally nobody who's sane wants to be at, or anyone who's in a part of a cult would even want to be at. And so I'm telling you all that because, I mean, he's just too gross. Like, you know? Some weird dork that like wears a diaper and is on meds all day. Or, God, I wish he was on meds. We'll go back to my own methamphetamines because I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Somebody who needs to be on Halidol or Trazodone. Right? So no, you're not going to get an effective solution on your housing problems from somebody with those kinds of issues, and not from Thune either. And the Senate itself is obviously in some stage of fighting. You know, the government of this country in the United States, at least for those of you who are from the U.S. or in the U.S. or don't understand it very well, is that it's run by people on multiple levels. You have your state, you have your county, you have your city. You even in larger cities have it where it breaks down. And you really need to know all this because he's an aging gorilla and a pervert, and he's dirty. And his ideas are dirty. And he's not someone who's going to fix housing. And that housing bill wasn't going to be any better than the Patriot Act. It was going to be another piece of shit Patriot Act, right? You don't want one of those. What was the problem with the Patriot Act? It had a bunch of weird crap in it. It was an omnibus bill and a mess, and it violated people's human rights. We don't want another one of those, okay? It just isn't wanted. You know, nobody wants to Save the Puppies Act with weird crap in it that violates people's human rights. That was the problem with the Patriot Act. It was literally a wartime act that was put through, and all it did was create a bunch of labor rights violations, okay? So don't sit around and wait on U.S. senators or the president to fix your housing problems. They're not going to do it. You know, God, it would be nice if all the weirdos from Iran and Russia and China and Israel, apparently now we have to include in this, the Ashkenazi Israelis would just leave the country, and maybe Iranians really are, but it's important to understand all of that. So, that's all I have to say about it. There's something going on with the Salvation Army in Northern Michigan giving out dog food for human consumption. It's actually really rude, and I'm kind of offended by it because you're not supposed to be giving out dog food to people who are actually poor, or even from food banks, or even just people that have money to go to the food banks. Like, that's just rude. So, let's see. Rose Valentino, this bizarre racist police officer that was caught a couple years ago in Cincinnati, it was about 3 years ago, has apparently been up in Petoskey, Michigan. Also looks a lot like Francis Isley. I'm sort of wondering. So like if Francis Isley also working as a Russian FSB police officer in Cincinnati like 3 years ago and got arrested? Because this person got arrested for going off on some black men on footage. NBC caught it and apparently took this person's side as an officer who was racist. Most of us probably didn't interpret the information correctly at the time, but as you know, NBC is basically Moscow News. They were concerned that one of their own was in trouble. I need to remind you there's no legal precedent for police to sell kids, guns, drugs, or people in the U.S. as investigations. As most of you probably realize, all of this was covered in faster guns investigations and major policy changes in the U.S. The reality is there was no precedent for faster guns in the first place, or any investigations where things were simply given away That was just simply a number of processes where the Russian FSB tried to assert themselves as the local police across the U.S. and ran shady investigations. There's no such thing as an investigation where the U.S. government just takes your things. There's just no such thing. Or where you're supposed to pay people off. That's called extortion. So, and there's no such thing as U.S. government being allowed to just sell your children. You know? So, just a reminder. Yeah, Freedom 250 Festival reduced to just vanilla ice and was apparently rained out. Oh, good. Like, I didn't want to pay for that thing. I'm really concerned about the money that Donald Trump is blowing because he took all that money from Endeavor Corp, $8 billion, and I seriously doubt he's paying for any of the events that he's having right now. And he really has turned this weird, degenerate old borderline that wears a diaper and shits himself all day and takes methamphetamine and wants to have weird parties. So, Citizen Vigilante, the newest white supremacist film being streamed on X. I saw some clips of it with Armie Hammer. It looked terrible. It has a very strange character, white male lead character with Armie Hammer in it, who appeared to be against the Muslim community from the footage I saw on a rape. It was extremely contrived. I found literally none of it appealing, and frankly, just rude. Badly written, badly constructed, badly acted, offensive to anyone who's ever been a victim of rape, and certainly anyone who's been through it such as I have. I can tell you that Timothy McVeigh, who appears to be very white, is very much a part of the Muslim community as well, the cult of ISIS, which streams and expands itself throughout the supposed Christian, Jewish, and Muslim communities, meaning that literally the KKK and the Taliban are the same group because they're stemmed from the Russian FSB. It's important to understand that it was poorly acted, poorly written, acted in dumb, cliched, stereotyped, and disassociative. I don't recommend watching it. I unfortunately probably could have watched the whole thing for free and didn't want to. So, I need to go through a history lesson and remind you that Lauren Sanchez, who is Patrick Wetzel's former wife of Endeavor Corporation, and is always at the Met Gala, which is a huge child labor trafficking fest, full of perverts and weirdos from various communist groups and Bolsheviks. That's why we don't like the Met Gala. And we would appreciate if the U.S. government would actually shut down and stop having it, and allow it to be shut down or shut down themselves. It's important to know that Lauren Sanchez was a follower of Pol Pot and came over to the U.S. in the 80s. She's a lot older than she pretends to be. That she was heavily investigated by various organizations she's worked for. We don't have to go into making their life more difficult by restating it. And I just want to remind you of that because she's been around in Petoskey, Michigan, follower Pol Pot. Let's go back through some of the history of the Khmer Rouge. It was essentially a group that treated educated intellectuals. It didn't have a problem with educated intellectuals. It just didn't like any educated intellectuals that didn't agree with it and its leader, Pol Pot. Remember that Cersei actually tried to mix the histories of Ho Chi Minh and Pol Pot together when I was growing up and tried to force me to incorrectly cite history. Both Ho Chi Minh and Pol Pot spent time in France. Ho Chi Minh spent time in France to try to act for food for his people and that they not be abused. Pol Pot spent time in France having a fabulous time partying with the French elite and essentially created a plan for his people to take over and switch from one communist dictatorship that was horrible and mean to the people to another communist dictatorship that was horrible and mean to the people. So basically he was just trained by the French communist Bolsheviks to be a nasty asshole and had a strong relationship with Russia and China himself. Of course, the Khmer Rouge is very heavily affiliated with an extension of the Chinese CCP. That's the way it's seen. What we found out in the 90s is that there was a huge number of people that came to Janesville, Wisconsin, who were supposed to be victims of the Khmer Rouge, who turned out to just simply be the Khmer Rouge. We literally had guys walking around Parker High School and Craig High School in the 90s when I was growing up, wearing the literal communist uniforms that the Khmer Rouge wears. Lauren Sanchez did attend Luther College, which is a communist labor camp in Iowa. It still exists today, even though it's had its accreditations taken away. And it's not a real college. Remember, I was forcibly sent there in labor traffic. Unfortunately, still today, deal with people from that group who's trying to stalk me and labor traffic me again. And I say all this to you because, it's really important to see the signs of it when somebody is, for example, lying and saying they're Filipino, but it's pretty clearly Cambodian Khmer Rouge. Lauren is an overt labor trafficker and a nasty person who doesn't belong free in this country. And I don't think there's anything more horrifying than having a bunch of people from the Khmer Rouge that follow Pol Pot or, want to carry on his legacy today, I mean, your current president had Lauren Sanchez to the White House for the inauguration. They are friends. So, all there is to say about it. I do some more bug spray. I do bug spray on my backside too. So, also it's important to note that this person had some really nasty, weird behaviors last year in Michigan and actually stalked me. And I'm pretty sure it was after myself and some other people, graduates of the school, that got out of labor trafficking situations. It's pretty scary times for a lot of us, that having a president and leadership that has empowered these people, and they don't understand how the country works really, not to realize that they're not empowered to do it. And thank God the rest of us are adults, so we also know they're really not. But that's the basic truth about it. They're just simply not free to be weirdos anymore like they once were. Because the rest of us are better educated, better trained, the U.S. itself is better organized. So even when we have a president who's literally a communist dictator, it just doesn't matter anymore, because we have no, take you to our leader doesn't exist in the United States of America. So a person can literally get out of a situation and simply not have to ever return. Once they figure out how to get out of it. It can take a lot of work, but let's see. But yeah, very heavily affiliated with the Chinese CCP company endeavor. Very disempowered these days and very desperate, so it's something to be watching out for. Don't feel sorry for them. They have a habit of making themselves look like victims, and they're not. That's typical of psychopathy. By the way, I can't think of anything more borderline and stupid than Trump's people screaming and yelling at us that we're all supposed to leave, and I finally realized that that's why his borderline weirdo policy with the actual U.S. border is so ineffective, because he doesn't want anyone to leave. He's just a psychotic nut that's screaming at people and doing drugs from the White House. So, I also want to note that with the Trump administration, it's literally full of neocons, Bolshevik, creepy, complete with burn. Yeah, we covered that. I think we're done. Oh, also, anytime somebody starts getting weird with you and claiming that you're an agent or you're at the CIA, even though bizarrely the CIA was taken over by Booz Allen Hamilton, making a communist organization today, it's called corporatism, and it's pretty much useless as an organization. It's 100% important for you to realize that that's the number one sign that they're a communist and part of either Khmer Rouge, Chinese CCP, or Russian FSB. They're part of a communist extremist group. It's very violent if their first response is to start calling you a CIA agent or a U.S. agent. Also, it means that they're literally guilty. Like, if their first thing to do is like, you're a cop because you have basic morality, that's a huge sign of guilt and thuggery and communist training background membership. It's how they signify themselves, and that's their favorite insult, is to say you're a cop. Well, the irony is a lot of them are actually cops, and they're dirty cops, and they suck. So, I also need to remind you that Terry Galvez and her husband, Michael Cleary, have been up in the area as well. They're both fairly dangerous communists. I don't know why they bothered to come up here from the D.C. area, but I know that they're both really nasty labor traffickers and were identified that way when I was in the D.C. area, and unfortunately I met them during some of my travels. And as you would probably remember, Terry Galvez went to Mitt Romney's event out in Fairfax during the 2012 election race cycle for president, and heavily undermined his campaign and yelled and said that he didn't have enough brown people at his event. And this was in front of myself and Rich Counts, who was the head of DCYRs at the time. Michael pretty clearly hit on me, but it was more of a setup. Didn't mean anything. The two of them are pretty tight as a couple, and it's important to remember that they pretty clearly undermined former Governor Mitt Romney, former Senator Mitt Romney's career, and especially his Terry behavior. So that seems to be about it today. It's a little buggy out here. I've had to put bug spray over myself and everything. So, but I'll see you all again, and there's more fun on OnlyFans at Deborah K, DeborahKay, and I'll see you again soon. Bye. This is me, Deborah K.